Please remember that nothing we say here should be taken as personal advice. The conversation is for entertainment purposes only. If you have questions about your financial situation, please talk to a licensed financial advisor. All right, welcome to another episode of Future Money, where we talk about the investments of the future.
Where we make you money.
We're excited to have a repeat guest. I think is he our first ever repeat?
I think so.
Oh, maybe Pedro from Global X, but
yeah.
I think you might be one of our first ever repeats. So welcome back.
I'm honored.
Yeah, Jon Grauman, very good friend of mine, fan of yours. You know, first of all, congratulations on being one of the top agents in LA.
Thank you.
I saw that in LA Biz Journal, so that's a big
Number 10.
achievement. Number 10.
Number
That's
10.
fantastic.
Nice. Wow.
Yeah, you've been a good friend for me for many years now. You've helped me make a lot of transactions in my life. You've really kind of taught me a lot about real estate, so I appreciate that, and I appreciate you being here to share some of the knowledge. Obviously, there's a lot going on.
Lots to talk about.
Let's talk about the fun stuff. Let's talk about the fun stuff. You have a Netflix show coming out in 2 days.
Yeah, season 2.
Season 2, right?
It's dropping the end of this week.
That's awesome. How excited?
I'm excited. We did the premiere last night, so that was fun.
Okay.
It's a bigger show. It's a bigger cast. There's more episodes. There's a bigger budget. We took trips. We went to Miami. We went to Aspen.
Oh, amazing. Okay.
Yeah, I think it's a great show, and I'm excited for people to watch it.
So it's Buying Beverly Hills.
Buying Beverly Hills.
Yeah. Season 1 was awesome. I binge watched it, I have to say. Obviously, you're my friend, so it was awesome to see you. But I know you were a little worried about how it's going to come out. It come out perfectly.
I was a little worried, naturally. I mean, every time you're going to put yourself out there on television, you're a little worried. Plus, it was the first season. I didn't know how they were going to portray us and so forth. But no, it's, again, the cast is great. The house porn is off the charts.
House porn, yeah.
We have some, $40 and $60 million listings featured this season that are just incredible, which is fun for the viewers because most people obviously never get to see the inside of a $40, $50, $60 million home. So it's very fun.
When you get to our age, house porn is really, really important.
I mean,
that's the thing that we do. Just randomly sit at home and you're bored and you're looking at Zillow and just checking out random houses for no apparent reason. You're like, I'm not moving or buying anything. I'm just looking for some reason.
That about summarizes the real estate industry right now.
Oh man,
that's tough. I didn't mean to get at you that early in the show.
Yeah. So Jon, you're one of the top agents in LA. Obviously, you work for the agency, which is one of the premier firms in LA.
Mm-hmm.
You've been in this business for many years. My first question to you is like, what's going on? How is the real estate?
Hey, let's back up a second. We had him on before. It was 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Right.
Thank you, Jon Grauman, for being here.
I don't think it's any secret that the bar for entry into real estate is far too low. Just crazy. Think about that stat. There are more agents than there are active houses to sell.
Yeah. And we talked about a lot of the same things we're going to still talk about today, right?
Probably different answers.
Yeah. Right. Well, that's kind of the beauty of doing these parts of the shows. We could talk about what were we right about, what were we not right about.
Sure.
Right. So let's start with, what did we talk about last time?
Yeah, so rates have gone up, right? Like when we 2 years ago, rates were in the 2s and the 3s. The Fed raised rate 5.5 percentage points in 18 months, right? So mortgage rates are 7% right now, maybe on high 6s. Obviously, the screeching halt in the real estate market the last 12 months or so.
Yep.
Is that changing? Like, are we seeing more transactions happening? I know transactions basically dried up.
Not much, to be honest, in terms of a change. The year started very promising. It seemed like, people sort of emerged from this holiday hibernation with a renewed sense of confidence and optimism, and all of a sudden it seemed like the sentiment was starting to change, right? The conversations were changing, and you guys know as well as anyone, as the conversations go, so does the market, right? So it seemed like, okay, it seems like the worst of it's behind us, because if you think back to the end of last year, rates had steadily come down over the course of Q4, and then the Fed, of course, came out with that announcement just before the holidays, signaling that they were baking in or anticipating multiple rate cuts this year. I think that was all the market needed to just start to sort of shift. And honest to God, no sooner did we think it or did those words leave our lips, the market pulled back again. And I think it was just a reminder that recoveries don't happen overnight.
Yep.
This is going to take time. We're still in a high interest rate environment. That's still obviously what's hindering our market the most.
Yep.
And to your point, and to yours as well, in terms of like, what did we get wrong? What did we get right? Well, I think what most people got wrong was when you think of a correction, most people thought it would come in a drop in the value of homes.
Yeah.
Right? Rates go up. people's purchasing power goes down, and thus so should home prices.
Right.
But that's not what happened, and that's where people got it wrong. The correction came in the form of a drop in the volume of transactions, not in the value of homes.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is simple, as you touched upon, which is just that, you know, interest rates went up essentially more than double what they were just a short while ago. But because of the imbalance in the supply and demand chain, that is to say, because there's such limited inventory out there, it created essentially a stalemate that helped to inadvertently stabilize home prices, which I don't think anyone saw coming.
Well, actually, to your credit, you kind of said something
I saw
along the way. Nobody saw coming. I remember actually in our conversation, you kind of said something along, maybe not exactly like that, but you kind of said something along the same lines, which is, you know, we're going to get all these, you were talking specifically about, I remember a couple buyers that you had that were, or sellers that were like, look, if I don't get the price I want, whatever, you know, I'll just sit on it. And you talked specifically about the higher end.
Sure.
Kind of just like, they're like, well, I got the money. I don't need to sell this place.
Yeah.
I'm just going to sit on my hands until I get what I want, frankly.
Unless there has been, for most people, unless there has been a life event that has necessitated the buying and selling of real estate, why would you? I can't argue that point, right? If you're sitting on a 2.5% interest rate and you're thinking about selling and would obviously have to trade out of that into a 7% interest rate, if you don't have to, why would you? It's a very obviously logical argument that I think most homeowners have made over the last 2 years, which is why people have just, you know, when in doubt, do nothing. They just sat.
So you think prices did not move because of that? Like there is no real new supply coming into the market?
Pretty much, yeah. I think we have seen single-digit movement up or down over the course of the last 18, say 20 months, right? The national average has gone up, again, single-digit, 3-4 digits, 3-4%, excuse me. And we've seen some depreciation, but again, we're not seeing like 10, 20% swings by any means. And I think it's important for, you know, your viewers and for everyone to understand that the deceleration of appreciation is different than depreciation.
Correct.
Sure.
Right? So appreciation hasn't gone up as much as it was, but it doesn't mean it's depreciating. Those are two different things.
Right.
Yeah.
But to be fair, outside of markets like Beverly Hills, for example, 3 to 4% is a normal real estate inflationary measure.
It's very healthy.
And
LA hasn't seen 3-4%
I'm not.
for years.
I'm not talking because he was talking about national numbers, right? LA is different, right? Supply, the type of people, the amount of money that's here. Like, you know, there's sort of segments, but there's parts of LA that you can go that, you know, are probably not, you know, doing the same thing that they are in Beverly Hills, Santa Monica, Brentwood, those areas. But like traditionally, when you look nationwide, 3 to 4% is kind of what you would expect.
That's
from
a healthy market.
Normal rate. Yeah.
Look, I think one way to phrase this that will probably speak to your audience is real estate's a commodity like anything else.
Yeah.
So what happens when there's less of any commodity?
Right.
Its value goes up. Or in this case, it at least stabilized.
Sure.
Right? Because there's no reason why it should have stabilized, right? If a rates took up more than double, prices should have come down, but it's the imbalance that ultimately led to that. And if you think about it from a buyer's perspective, frankly, it's really unfair. Right? Yeah. Buyers got pushed around and slapped around and beat up for so many years in this very frothy market. Rates go up. All the buyers are like, finally, we're going to get a little relief. Prices are going to come down. And they didn't, and they haven't, and they're not going to. That's the sad reality that a lot of buyers need to come to is if you're sitting there and you're still watching and waiting, it's time to accept the reality that they're not going to come down.
I was going to ask you psychologically, like, are people finally kind of getting used to this new reality that you have to jump in no matter what? Maybe you don't get the best property that you dreamt of because these rates are not going to come down that much and you're not going to find cheaper properties down the road. Like, are you starting to see people just kind of basically almost kind of
capitulate?
Give up? Yeah, capitulate.
In some instances, again, I think it comes down to each individual's life circumstance. If you were ready to buy a home a couple of years ago and you've been waiting, I think certain people are like, okay, I'm not going to wait anymore. I don't want to hold my life up. You know, to me, it's more a matter of, and these are the conversations I'm having, look, if you can afford the payment today, know that there will be refinance opportunities down the road. So you're holding this for, I don't know what the term is. I don't want to say whether it's short or long because that's inherently subjective, but you know, there will be an opportunity to refinance into a low rate. So as long as it's affordable today, those opportunities will present themselves later. And some people are starting to get in off the sidelines. There's a terrible, very cheesy expression in our industry, which is, marry the house, date the rate. But it applies, and you understand that, like, okay, the house is really the asset, right? That's what you're holding on to. The rate, that moves with the market, and there'll be opportunities. But by and large, I think most people are still waiting. They're waiting for, I think everyone's waiting for the same signal. That same signal is the first rate cut. Yep. The first rate cut signifies that the worst of this is behind us, that we're on the ascent, that we're coming out of this. Again, how long of a recovery is unknown, but I think the analogy I use is that, like, everybody is like looking at the same third base coach, waiting for them to wave them home. It's like, when is that first cut coming? And we all thought it might be in Q1, and that's why the year started with so much promise. And then clearly that didn't happen, and the market pulled back.
So I was talking to Alex. A lot of our clients, a lot of our team members in the firm, upwardly moving young people who basically make good money, do well. You know, they're gonna do better, but they're also building families and having, life events that are happening, and they feel like they're priced out. Like, what would you recommend them do?
I would start with empathy. That seriously, I really empathize with these buyers, because for first-time home buyers, particularly millennials that are coming into their own, right? They have careers they're getting established in, they're making some money, maybe they got married, maybe they had their first kid. A lot of them feel really priced out, and I would say, just get in, start building equity. You can use that to ultimately trade up. But if you're gonna, if you're sitting on the sidelines thinking, I'm gonna wait for prices to come down. Look, if you're just looking at LA specifically for a second, right? The inventory issue is not one that's going to change anytime soon. Right? We can't build any further west. There's a big ocean right there. We've gone as far east as we can go. Right? We've already crossed the 5 into Eagle Rock and Mount Washington and Highland Park. And the other side of that's Pasadena. Okay. Downtown is, I'm not even going to go there, kind of a wasteland. But, this city that has historically always been very horizontal is starting to go vertical. And you're starting to see a lot more vertical living options being built. But that's not really what people come to LA for. So again, there's only so much supply available, and that is going to keep prices in check.
You heard that, Alex. Get in, buddy.
So will there be? Let's leave LA aside for a second, but the inventory. Do we know what a time frame for catch up is going to be? Like, obviously they've underbuilt for decade and a half. Let's call it. Probably since the financial crisis, right? So we got 16 years of underbuilding. And now we're trying to catch up. Is there any hope of catching up in the next few years?
I mean, not to be a doomsday, but no.
So no.
No, there isn't.
No. We want real information.
I don't think, like you said, we fell behind pace. Starting back in 2008, right, during the financial crisis, we fell behind pace to keep apace with the growing population. And if you look at what construction costs are right now, what labor costs are, what material costs are right now, I don't see any which way that we're going to ultimately catch up with that.
So did none of those things come down, like, after the initial surge of...
No, they went up.
Cost of materials, even though, like, all of the inflationary measures showed that the cost of materials actually
labor is
labor. I understand, like, I understand
a lot of cost of materials, concrete, wood, a lot of those costs went up. It's become very challenging for builders, especially just looking at deals, trying to find deals that pencil. Right. It's challenging for me to try to bring deals to my clients that ultimately pencil, that I can sign off on and say, I've underwritten this. And I believe, even conservatively, that there's meat on the bone, that there's money to be made.
Totally.
So how is regulation in here, like, especially talking about LA? Because there is, you and I talk about
a lot of
ULA and some of the stuff that is some bullshit stuff that's going on in the city. I'd love to talk about that a little bit.
It's frankly just adding insult to injury. There's so much political headwind, which is making an already challenged industry that much more challenging. ULA is obviously at the very top of that. Can we explain to people what ULA is? ULA, also known as the mansion tax, went into effect April 1st of last year, 2023, and it applies to home sales in the city of Los Angeles. So to be clear, not applicable to the city of Beverly Hills, not applicable to the city of Santa Monica, although Santa Monica has their own version of it. But for home sales between $5 and $10 million, there's an additional tax of 4% that's applied to that. And for sales north of $10 million, there's an additional tax of 5.5% applied. That's taken off the top. Right. So if you sell your house for $5 million, but you're upside down and you owe 5.1,
you pay $200.
You're still paying the $200,000 tax.
That's so nonsensical.
But also not just houses. any real estate.
Commercial properties as well.
So even like low income housing, commercial it's so stupid.
Because we know in LA it's easy to have a multi-family house that you sell a building over $5 million. That's like nothing in LA.
Yeah.
And they got it on as a mention tax because
they just throw a number out. They
sketchy.
They throw $5 million out, and everyone goes, I'm not gonna feel bad for the guy who's got $5 million house or the woman who has a $5 million house. That's not realizing that if you have an apartment building that houses 10 people. Right? That it's much easier to get to that number.
Yeah, the city grossly oversold what that was meant to be. They initially, when they were campaigning about it, projected $900 million a year in tax revenue.
They got barely 50.
Are you saying the government overstated something that they got?
Dude, it's so bad.
Hot take number one.
Dude, they borrowed against this $900 million projected to spend on other stuff. It's so crazy.
Yeah, we're not even talking about the misappropriation of the funds.
Listen, we could get into this. This could be a whole separate
There's an
thing.
opportunity to repeal this. I think the Taxpayer Protection Act, which is hopefully going to go on the ballot. So that's something that hopefully will repeal this.
Yes. So there's a lot of rumors and confusion in the market about this. So what I had been hearing was that the fight against ULA, that is the fight to have it repealed, has enough signatures to qualify to go on the ballot in November.
Correct.
That's actually not correct. However, there is a tax reform bill called TPA, right? The Taxpayers
Protection Act.
Taxpayers Protection and Government Accountability Act. We'll just call it TPA. So TPA does have enough signatures to qualify to go back on the ballot, but it still needs to get approved by the courts this summer.
Right.
If it gets approved by the courts and if it goes on the ballot and if it passes, what's included in it is something called a look-back provision.
Sure.
And the look-back provision states that any ordinances passed from January 1st, 2022 onward that are in violation of TPA, which ULA is, would be automatically invalidated, or the city has 1 year to cure it. That means that the city has 1 year to put it back on the ballot for a special election. Then it would require a 2/3 majority for it to be upheld. If that doesn't happen, or if they just don't do that, they don't put it back on the ballot, then it automatically gets invalidated within a year.
So
ULA is here to stay for now.
Yeah, I was saying, it seems like a really easy process to get through that.
But I think what's important here, be aware, go vote, because these things impact us all, right?
Yes.
Even young people, maybe they don't afford a $5 million home today, but this impacts all of building in the city, and as a result, all real estate, right?
Yes. So unfortunately, TPA is not something you can vote on today. We need the court to approve it.
Right.
But if it gets approved and you see it on the ballot in November, please vote for that initiative.
Cool. So let's talk about something lighter.
Well, I want to go back real quick to the home building thing. Because I think home builders hold a lot of the key to whether we can ever get out of this mess. Obviously rates, other than the Fed and rates. Like you're saying, building materials are high, costs of labor are high. We know that. So are we just going to be in an environment for the next several years, like home building companies, for example, some of which we invest in, have been great investments over the past 12 to 24 months. Are they going to continue to be? Obviously, I'm not asking you to predict how the investments are going to do, but are these home builders affected by rates? Are the cost of material and labor mostly what they're doing? Are we going to see any ability for them to actually put houses on the market in the coming years?
That's a good question. I think it's going to be really challenging for them. Again, it's a simple equation when you look at it. The cost of debt is so much higher than it was before for them, and almost all of them take out debt. Very few of them self-finance. The cost of labor went up, the cost of materials went up, and the value and the home values didn't change. Right? There was no fluctuation, so there's just no give. So I think it's very difficult. I've seen a lot of builders that have, at least temporarily exited the space and looked at either low-income housing or somewhere else that they can be a little bit more effective and actually make money.
John helped me buy my house. My builder, who became good friends of ours, has been doing this for 30 years in LA, just moved to Florida. He's like, I can't do this anymore.
Can't do it.
Is that a specifically LA thing, or
it's a combination of LA, regulation, the market, all that.
Listen, LA is tough in Santa Monica in particular. Also, like I moved into my house in July of 2020. The people next door to me bought their house in September of 2020, tore it down, rebuilt, and they moved in a little bit less than a year ago.
Wow.
Took them 3 years to build a regular, probably 2,500 square foot house.
It's not uncommon, unfortunately.
It's crazy.
Well, Wow. Okay. Not good news there. Let's. You want to shift gears a little bit? Talk about the brokerage and real estate.
Oh, is that your lighter thing that you wanted to talk about? That's the lighter thing. We're sorry, man. We're not trying to ambush you. Unfortunately, real estate is dealing with a lot of things at the same time.
No, that was just a bad joke. Sorry, guys. No, I mean it's been a lot of things going on. There is this lawsuit in Tennessee that happened.
Yep.
And maybe give a little background on that.
Sure. Okay. Wow, where to start on this one? So here was the premise of the lawsuit. The premise was there was a gentleman in Minnesota who had his house listed for, I believe it was $400,000. Sat on the market for about 35 days. An offer was brought forth by a buyer's agent. They negotiated it down to $390,000, which is where it ultimately settled. This is back in, again, I want to say, I don't remember, either 2015, 16, or 17. It was years ago. And after the fact, after it closed, the guy came forth and said, hold on a second, why am I paying the buyer's commission when I essentially was negotiating against myself, right? I'm paying someone who's negotiating against me to get a lower price. I'm paying their commission. Why is that? And that's an interesting argument. I will give that. And then from there, it ultimately over years snowballed into what it is today, which is this massive class action lawsuit, this antitrust case. So there was a verdict that was issued, what is it now, few months ago, that was $1.8 billion to the plaintiffs. And that was before they determined whether or not they were even going to assess. I never know if it's threefold or threefold. I've heard it pronounced both ways. I think you know the point, which is that it could be 3 times the damages. And that's been just sort of looming out there. And then
that's lawyers trying to make money, by the way. Class action, right?
Yeah. So, and then as of Friday, a settlement was announced. NAR, the National Association of Realtors, has agreed to pay $418 million over the course of 4 years. Which I guess we'll get into that in just a second in terms of who the actual winners and losers are there. Well, I guess I'll go there now. It's definitely a win for NAR.
Really? Okay.
Because 100%. It's a win for NAR in the respect that they didn't have $1.8 billion to only have to pay $418 million, not to make light of that, but over 4 years is a relative win for them. It also relieves them of all the other cases that they're currly a part of. Excuses them from all of those other cases, which could have been, the damages again, could have been hundreds of millions or billions of dollars more. You know, the real winner here, of course, is the attorneys. The attorneys
30 to 40%.
Let's say on the low side they take 30%, right? So that's 120 million. If you look at the number of people that were involved in that class action, I would imagine the alleged victims here will probably get somewhere around $15 each. It's probably somewhere in that neighborhood. They're going to get nothing. They're going to get absolute peanuts. You know, so who won here? Well, the attorneys won. It's going to definitely send shockwaves through the business, through the industry. That said, there's so much sensationalism out there. There's so much clickbait out there. Most of which to me is utterly preposterous. I'll address one of the most egregious misnomers, which is I've seen these headlines that home prices are going to come down. Okay,
so silly.
Let's just talk about this for a second, okay? And let's keep the math simple. So let's say that your house is worth $1 million, and I, as a real estate agent, am brought out to assess the value of your home to determine where we want to position it in on the market. I don't look at it. No agent does, frankly, and say, I think your home's worth $1 million. Now let's tack on 5% for commissions and we'll list it for $1,050,000. No, the 5% in commissions is just a fee that's factored in that a seller has traditionally paid. So to suggest then that if half of that, 2.5%, they're not obligated to pay, that we're going to then approach that same meeting and say your home is worth $1 million, but you don't have to pay that 2.5% anymore, so let's drop it to $975,000 is utterly ridiculous. First of all, no seller is going to do that. They're going to try to squeeze out every cent that they can. Second of all, that's not how the valuation process works. And thirdly, it's actually going to have the opposite effect. Home prices are going to go up because what's going to happen is sellers are going to say, I read this article, I'm no longer responsible for paying this. A buyer's going to say, well, I don't have an extra $25,000. There aren't lending programs, at least not yet, that allow me to finance that $25,000. So I have to inflate my offer by $25,000. I'm going to offer you $1,025,000 to get the credit back to pay my broker. It's actually going to have the complete, who gets hurt here? The consumer gets hurt, and that's who it was meant to protect, who it was meant to benefit. So that part is very frustrating because it just didn't achieve its objective at all, in my opinion.
let's say that's the case on the short term. Is there a case to be made whereby this is the start of something that will happen over a course of a few years, where these commissions, right? Because again, you're in the real estate business. I know you do a lot. Frankly, there's a lot of realtors out there that don't do as much.
Yeah. Yep.
And paying 5 or 6% fixed commission, right? There's not a lot of industries. Go ahead. Yes.
Yeah, it's not though, and that's the part that, again, like these misnomers out there. So
Okay.
commissions have always been negotiable. Right. Always. A seller is never required. They don't have to pay 5% or 6%. It's something that has always been negotiated between the listing broker and the seller. And that was part of the argument is, hold on, why is the buyer commission being negotiated between the listing broker and the seller? Yeah. Which, again, is a fair point.
Sure.
And let me explain that a little bit further. So the way it has always traditionally worked is a seller pays a commission to his listing broker. Right. That listing broker then shares in that commission with the cooperating broker, i.e. the buyer's agent. Right. So I got a 5% commission. I'm going to give 50% of it to the cooperating broker that brings the buyer.
Because you're working together kind of thing. That's the premise.
Because there's always been, usually been representation on both sides. Yep. But it's never been a requirement. It's always been negotiable. Right. And it's still, by the way, this doesn't really change anything. Yeah. The ruling doesn't say that a seller can no longer offer compensation. It's saying that a seller can't advertise. And the reason for that is they made this huge argument, they being the attorneys on this case, of collusion and steering. Right. That agents were steering their clients towards properties that paid higher commissions. Maybe in middle America, when you have
Not in
a
LA.
track home and an A, B, C model to choose from, I could maybe see that argument. In my market, it makes no sense at all. The notion that I can take my client whose needs and requirements are very specific and unique to them, right, and push them to a property that doesn't work for them just because I receive a higher fee is utterly preposterous. Yeah. Like I get that there's some unscrupulous people in every industry, and real estate's no exception. Yep. But that's just an absurd notion.
Sure.
So look, there are workarounds to this that are very easy if the whole industry would cooperate, which it won't. Right. For example, if the real estate industry was united on this, all you would have to do is establish an individual website for each listing, and on that website, you offer the commission. You just don't do it through the MLS. It's that simple.
Sure.
So you move the MLS out of the picture.
That's it. Or on the MLS under showing instructions, it says, please contact for showings and for commission details. You just can't advertise it. It won't be that simple because there will be a race to the bottom, and there will be multiple discount brokerages and companies coming out of the woodwork saying, for $500, we'll fill out your paperwork and so on and so forth. So it was meant to create more free competition. What it's going to create is tremendous confusion. Right. Yeah. It's going to be an 18-car pileup of confusion coming our way because buyers aren't going to know what to do because there isn't any clear direction on what to do. Yeah. They're going to say, go figure it out. It's a free market, and it's going to just be tremendously confusing.
This is the biggest purchase of anybody's life usually, right? Trying to figure out online on some random website sounds to me like it's the dumbest thing you can do.
Yeah, and there will be that, this is to me the equivalent of like a FSBO, a for sale by owner. Yeah. So just like some people think they can list and sell their house on their own without a broker, and you can legally, you're not required to use a broker. You're not required to use a broker on the buy side. I would say, and I don't say this to sound like an ass, but try that out and let me know how it goes.
Sure.
Yeah, we have a job for a reason. We don't just turn on lights and open doors. We actually, bring a lot of value to the table, and it'll be interesting to see how that all plays out.
What models do you think are popping that'd be interesting that maybe can usurp or maybe change what's happening right now?
Well, I mean, if you just adopt the basic sort of principle that there's always opportunity and chaos, there's NAR has really exposed themselves here to having, agents, and this is the biggest association in the world, right? At one point, that I think 1.6 million members. Yeah. I think that they've really exposed themselves here in terms of not doing more to protect the people that they're meant to represent. Sure. This entire time they were saying, we got this, it's fine, no problem, and then obviously we know how it played out. So I think, the way it works now, just for those that don't understand, is as an agent who has to hang his license at a brokerage, that brokerage requires me to become a member of NAR, and I have to be a member of NAR to have access to the MLS. It's a true monopoly, right? There's no other way. I think that there's going to be opportunity for other companies to come in and say, you know what? Let's figure out a different way to do this. Let's find a different model. where brokers aren't required to do that because NAR has done nothing for us as an association.
Obviously, not a winner here, NAR, right? Like, because they brought in all these agents. There was really no training, no really, like, there's a lot of people that just came into the business. They don't know what they're doing.
Nope.
And they're making all this money for no reason. So maybe there's an opportunity for people like you who are true professionals who do this day in, day out for many years and bring real value. Maybe there is just a lot of these agents cannot be in this business.
I
don't know, this may be controversial, but
no, sure. Look, there's been talk about this over the last 18, 20 some odd months of, it's going to weed out a lot of agents. And to an extent, that's true. NAR lost more members over the last year than I think probably any time in history, in part probably because of the lawsuit, but also market conditions.
I was to say market conditions are probably as big.
But it's the bottom rung is the reality. Right?
Yeah.
It's the agents that weren't doing very much business anyways. So for the people that are, playing at a high level and competing at a high level, frankly, there's just less to compete for, but just as many agents, that are playing in that range. Yeah. So there'll be a shakeup here, and there'll be some people that leave the business. But there's just as many more coming into the business every day. So
I mean, this is something we talked about in our last podcast that we did with you, also, which is what does the average agent look like, right? There's highly skilled professionals who know every tidbit of everything they're doing, and you need them to close deals that basically other people can't close. And then there's, from what I remember, you quoted, and the reason it stuck in my mind is because it was the idea that I sort of had. You have the, soccer mom who decided she was going to get into real estate because her friend made a lot of money in 2020 and 2021 doing it. And that's ultimately who's going to get weeded out in the end, right? You're going to my opinion is what this thing does is maybe it changes commissions over time. Maybe there's more models. There's fee-for-service models that come out of this. Maybe there's lower overall commissions possibly. But ultimately, you're going to get the people who are the bottom rung are going to get weeded out. And the people who legitimately know what they're doing, the true professionals, which is what's supposed to happen in any industry, right? Is the true professionals with the cream of the crop will rise to the top. And those are the people that are truly needed. And maybe the person who, your friend's neighbor who is also a realtor who knows a house that's for sale, probably not going to be there in a few years.
Yeah, I mean, look, one of the things that would have been nice to see coming from this settlement is I've often talked about how there's far too low of a barrier for entry into this industry. It would have been great if there was something that, raised those requirements as part of this so that the people that are allowed to enter, that qualify to enter, are trained to be true fiduciaries, which they're not presently. You take one online test and poof, here's your license. And, it leads to a lot of things that you were talking about. The other thing that I have not seen addressed yet that I hope to God at some point they do, and by the way, there's more questions than there are answers right now, right? The news came out just days ago. There's countless hypothetical scenarios that I could talk about that, how is that going to be handled? And what would you do here? The biggest one for me is the issue of dual agency. So as it stands now, I have a listing and you could come to me and say, hey, I'm not represented. I'd like for you to represent me. And that's fair game, legally at least. I think that there's an inherent conflict of interest there, but I'll leave that for another day. If they leave this settlement, this ruling as it stands now, there's nothing to prevent every buyer, frankly, from going direct to every listing agent, which presents such an obvious conflict of interest. To me, you have to ban dual agency.
Oh, that'd make it even worse.
No, at least that way. So again, a buyer comes to me at an open house and says, hey, I'd like for you to represent me. And my response should be, I represent the seller. I have a fiduciary obligation to the seller. You need your own representation. And at least that way, there's a clear separation between church and state. How that buyer's agent is compensated, that becomes negotiable now. That becomes negotiable now. And part of the ruling, if we didn't address this already, is that you have to have a signed agreement with your buyer. And that agreement, we don't know what it's meant to say. In theory, it says something to the effect of, I am due a commission of X on this. I will seek to obtain it from the seller or selling agent. If I am unable to, you will be responsible for it. Which again just becomes all a matter of negotiation.
Do you think now, because I think people have ultimately just sort of accepted, right, what real estate commissions have been over the last 30 years or whatever it is. Do you think you're going to see a lot more people pressing the issue now? Because they don't follow details, they follow headlines. Right? They hear commissions are coming down, agents are charging too much. So now when I go to sell a house, I'm going to be like, I don't want to pay 5%. I want to pay 3%.
Yeah, I do think that we're going to see some commission compression, particularly on the buy side. Again, if the industry were more unified, which it's not, it's terribly fragmented because we're all independent contractors that are out for, we're all sort of all out for ourselves.
Sure.
But there's a way to sort of hold the line and say, like, this is the value that we bring, and this is what I charge on the list side, and this is what is going to be required to be paid on the buy side. But no, unfortunately, I think that you're going to see a lot of discount firms and brokers coming out, and unfortunately, that's it's just going to be a disservice that people are going to have to sort of learn the hard way. Is my unfortunate prediction.
I'll give you kind of an example from our industry, because our industry, right before the financial crisis, was all also commission based. 5% commissions were the norm. That's how people got paid. And then after the financial crisis, we saw the conflicts of interest, right? And that's kind of when we started our firm, is the fiduciary standard kind of took off, and we started this way of just really kind of removing these conflicts of interest. And people said the same thing. It's going to, all these people are going to get out and so forth. And frankly, a lot of people who would not accept this new standard did get out of the business, but the industry actually thrived because less conflict of interest. People knew who they were paying, what they were paying for, So I think out of chaos, hopefully some positive will come.
You get a couple different things, right? So you get at what happened out of that, right? This was, the banks, the Merrill Lynch's, the wirehouse firms and all those companies, right? They were brokerage based. That was kind of their model, right? So you sort of got the rise of the registered investment advisor, the RIA, like our firm, where it's, we don't sell commissions. We're the fiduciary standard. But then on the flip side, kind of like on the far other side, right? Kind of like what you're talking about, we got these do-it-yourself models, right? We got these, the robo-advisors, as we call them. We got this. And
shit show.
Well, here's the funny thing, right? Kind of like what Jon was talking about, do it on your own, see how that goes. And in our business, right, like you can do it on your own theoretically, and it can be fine.
Yeah.
Like if you just did it on your own. Well, we know people are people and they're not robots and they need help.
Yeah.
And they need that. And what happened to all the robo advisors? First of all, they got bought out by bigger firms.
Yeah.
Because they couldn't make money on the very, very low fees they were charging people, and the low fees were like 0.25 to 0.5. And I remember having meetings with some people and going like, look, you can go directly to Vanguard and get a low cost ETF. You don't need these guys. I was like, if you're not going to use an advisor, you might as well use the even cheaper option, right? Why are you even paying these guys to do anything? And what we saw is all those companies now went,
became lead generation for other firms.
Right. We need advisors. Without advisors, we kind of don't really have anything.
No, very. I think there's a lot of parallels to draw there, and yes, I think that once we get through this, and I don't know if that's months or years. I would probably say years.
It's probably years.
I hope the industry will have come out of it, better. I don't look. Real estate agents aren't going anywhere. It's not like this is the end of the real estate agent. It is a restructuring. It is a decoupling. That's the main thing. Is they're just decoupling the way commissions are paid to try to have clear separation, which is why I'm such a big proponent of banning dual agency. If you want to decouple, then you have to make sure
remove
that
the conflict.
That's
it.
You
got to remove the conflict.
I've also heard, and this is somewhat. This isn't factual based, right? This is somewhat conjecture, so take that for what it is. But I've heard that the attorneys do not want to take out dual agency because it's such a clear violation of conflict of interest. They want to leave it in there because it gives us something else to go after.
Oh, wow. That's dark.
Yeah.
That is.
Yeah, because again, it makes no sense. Why wouldn't you? It's like, well, because we know we got you.
Oh, wow.
So we'll just leave it in there.
Yeah.
Damn.
So,
all right, we hammered this. Thank you for your candor, because you hear all, as Ayal say, it's all about headlines. It's really important to kind of dig deeper, and that's why I love
nuance,
having you here, understanding this nuance and like how this works and how it's going to impact people.
I want to ask one of our favorite questions, which we haven't gotten to yet. You can't talk about anything these days without talking about AI. So, do you guys, how do you foresee AI either helping or harming people in your business also, right? We know, I personally think, specifically if you think of things like mortgage brokers and escrow and all that stuff, which is very, very paper intensive things, like do we see a streamlining of the process? Is like, are people going to lose their jobs because of this?
I think like in every industry, there are ways that it's going to help. There are ways that it's going to hurt. There are ways that it's going to compete. I do not think that AI is going to replace the real estate agent, but I do think that the smart real estate agents will use AI to make them more efficient and more effective. For example, and this is just a small example, but we use it all the time for property descriptions, which believe it or not is unbelievably time consuming. When you're constantly writing a description, I mean, how many different ways can you describe a house? And it's incredibly efficient for us that like you just give, you just type in the basic sort of attributes and there it is.
Add the words beautiful, adorable, add the words
quaint, charming,
spacious.
So in that respect, it's been, made us a lot more efficient. And again, that's just one of many examples. But I still think that this is a business that requires so much hand-holding and that each situation is so unique and different that, I don't know, I don't care how clever, the AI, algorithm programming is. I think that there is actual human involvement that's going to be required.
Emotions. We always say, like, the emotional part of buying a house, of am I going to do it wrong, or what am I supposed to know? I don't know.
But also, like, I remember, this is a personal experience when I was working with Jon. Jon, he manages you, the buyer, manages the emotions, he manages the transaction.
For sure.
The negotiation, which is really one of the most important part of this, all this shit, computer can't do this, you gotta have someone who's very smart.
Unless another computer's doing the other side of the negotiation, then now we're really talking.
The hard part about this, again, when you talk about the negotiation is, the way it's meant to work is that let me put it this way. There's a reason why the commission is not in the current offer.
Right.
Because we're not meant to be a party to the deal. The deal is meant to be between the buyer and the seller. Right. But all of a sudden now, your commission's going to become a part of it. And then it's like, well, now people start getting really dug in because, well, hold on a second. Now I have to factor that in. I got to pay your commission. And again, I'm not saying it was a perfect model to begin with, but I liked the principle that this is not about me as the broker. I'm a conduit. I'm here to help facilitate a deal, but this is a transaction between buyer and seller. I'm not party to it. And now we are.
Right.
Yeah.
One last question. Awesome conversation. One last question is, we've seen real estate company, Redfin, Zillow, tumbled quite a bit last couple of weeks. I know the market reacts first and thinks later, right? Kind of thing.
Sure.
After this judgment or after this verdict, what do you make of that?
That's a great question. And I'll just say I've had some conversations with those folks and, nobody has answers yet.
Sure.
A number of their models are based on the current system.
Sure.
If that system goes away,
where do we go?
Where do we go? And I don't know that they know. So again, all I can really say to that is that, there's going to be opportunities here. There are going to be some new ideas put forth that hopefully will, reshape and revolutionize the industry in a positive way that can make sense of some of these nonsensical rules that they've put in place. And I'm just as curious and terrified as anybody. So I don't.
All right. I was hoping you have a nugget for me.
I wish I did. I've made some calls and I'm not getting any direct answers. And I think it's because they don't have any yet.
Yeah. We're this is right. It's so brand new. We actually booked this show with you before this ruling even came out.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of like,
it was perfect. He has his Netflix show coming up in 2 days.
Totally.
I could not think of a better guest.
It's just like a confluence of everything.
Thank you for being so candid and really illuminating us on this stuff, because it's very complicated. I know you're taking clients, so any of our clients, I know you've done a great job for me personally, but a lot of our clients, thank you for that. Thank you for always being a fiduciary, for really telling them how it is and doing amazing work. Anything else you want to say?
No. Godspeed.
If we can make rates go down, that'd be great. Jon would be like,
you want to attack rates fast? Real fast? No, we're done.
No, thanks for having me on. I do think that There are brighter days ahead. I think that the market will get incrementally better throughout the course of the year. Yeah. I don't think that, I think it's going to go up a little bit, down a little bit, up a little bit, down a little bit, but the trajectory will ultimately be on the upward. I think that the moment we see the first rate cut, again, I think you're going to experience such a sigh of relief and people that are going to want to get off the sidelines because, again, the demand for housing has not waned. It has not diminished. It's just getting pent up. And the longer we're in this correction cycle, the longer it gets pent up. But you're going to see a slew of people come off the sidelines when rates come down, especially once they kind of settle in the mid fives for any sort of sustainable period. When that happens, mark my words, competition is going to create, I think you're just going to have more people come in. It's going to create competition, and competition ultimately drives prices up. Sure. So that will likely be the start of the next boom, which I anticipate will be probably Q1 or Q2 of next year, once we're on the other side of the election and things have a chance to calm down a little bit. I'll just end by saying if you're a buyer, we're coming into the spring selling season, and now is probably a good time. Same as a seller. Once we get within a couple months proximity of the election, the market's going to start to feel a little toxic because there's just going to be so much uncertainty out there. But on the other side of that, again, especially with a little love from interest rates, I really feel like you're going to see the start of the next bull market pick up into early 2025.
Nice. Jon Grauman from the agency.
And Netflix fame.
Yeah.
You can find me on Instagram at Jon Grauman, JONGRAUMAN.
Thank you again for being on, man.
Yep, you got it.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, good seeing you guys. Thanks.